What's going on, guys? Dr. Andrew Fix back here for another episode on the code. And today is going to be kind of fun. We're going to almost recap a prior episode, but this has been so long that, it's really quite amazing to imagine that this podcast has been going on close to 3 years at this point as of the recording of this. So today what we're going to talk about is this concept of rocks. And what I mean by rocks is like big, important goals, big, important things that you have going on. And what I want to encourage you to do is to go back and listen to episode number 6 on this podcast, where we talked about a sports recovery pyramid and where we should spend most of our time in terms of like how we can get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of sports recovery related things and making sure we feel good. So before we dive into it, again, I just mentioned we're slowly closing in on 3 years on this podcast, and that wouldn't be without all of you guys that are tuning in to listen to this. So whomever you are, wherever you are, really appreciate your time tuning in, listening to the show. And hopefully each time you do tune in and listen, you're able to pull something of value out of this. And I would encourage you to drop me a message, make some comments, leave reviews and things. Like if you have topics that you would love to hear about, please let us know so that we can get some interviews or get some topics and recordings out on these things for you guys. So again, thank you so much. And let's dive into it. So maybe you guys have seen, and I'm going to use a glass as the example. Maybe you guys have seen this science experiment or this video that has gone around the internet many times. Or maybe you did this in school yourself, where you're in science class. You have a bunch of larger rocks, maybe not as big as my hands, but you have some rocks, some stones. You have a handful of smaller pebbles, think like pea gravel or something. You have a bowl or a bucket of sand, and then you have a glass or something filled with water. And your science instructor says, I want you to fit as many of all of these things into this container, into this beaker as possible. And if you've seen that video, you know that the most efficient way to get as many of those things into that container, into that beaker as possible is to start with the biggest things first. So first you're going to put the rocks in. You're going to fit as many of them as you can. Then you're going to pour in the small pebbles. They're going to fall along and fall in place along the rocks. After that, because we're getting smaller still, you're going to take the grains of sand and you're going to pour those in. And they're going to fill all the crevices in between the rocks and in between the pebbles, and they're going to fit in there. And you could probably even shake it a little bit, and it'll kind of settle down even more. And then last but not least, after you have things pretty compact, you're going to then slowly pour the water in, and it's going to gradually find its way and fill up any remaining space left in that beaker. Conversely, if you were to try this the other way, if you were to pour all of that water in first, and then you start putting in sand, and then you start putting in pebbles, then you start putting in rocks, what's going to happen is that beaker is already filled up. All the space is already taken up. The water is just going to start overflowing from the sides, and you're not going to be able to fit as much stuff into that beaker. And if you've not done this before, it's a fun thing to try with kiddos. Like I said, it's a common school age children science experiment for people to just understand how you can take up as much space as possible and how you can fit as many things in a confined space as possible in the most efficient manner. But how do we relate this to our health or to our decision making? So how this kind of came up, we were having a meeting, some of our team at Physio Room, and we were talking about and going over what our big rocks are for the next quarter in our practice and what goals and what things we want to accomplish over the next 3 months, over the next 6 months, etc. And we do this each quarter, and we review what these rocks are, and we decide on new goals and why we want to accomplish these things. And the reason we call them rocks is because they're the big, important things that we should be focusing as much of our attention on as possible, and not focusing as much of our attention and time and decision-making power on the little pebbles, the sand, and the water, the day-to-day fires that we're all going to have, that we're all going to need to put out, the spilled cup of coffee, you're running late to something, but you have to stop and fuel up your car because you're running low on gas and your light just came on. Like, these are going to be things that no matter how much planning there is, you're going to run into these little things no matter what. So the more time and attention and focus you can put on the big items, the rocks, the better off you're going to be and the more you are going to set yourself up for success. So back on episode 6 in this podcast where we talked about the sports recovery pyramid, this kind of relates to the exact same thing. And we talked about all these different things that we can do to try and improve how our body feels. And we talked about all the hot topic things that are out there these days. Things like saunas, things like ice baths, both things that I really enjoy. Things like taking supplements and using different sports recovery tools, such as a massage gun like I have here. Getting massages, going to physical therapy, going to the chiropractor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And while all of those things are great, they don't make up or they wouldn't comprise the base or the most important part of the sports recovery pyramid. Those things that I just listed off would not probably be the rocks in terms of like, how can you best set yourself up for success and how can you best take care of yourself so that your body feels capable and resilient to do the things that you want to be able to do. What would come first, and the things that are probably more important and make up the base of the pyramid, and then we narrow as we get to the top, just like the rocks are more important and the water is least in terms of what you put in first into the beaker, is we need to focus on our sleep and our rest, right? If somebody is doing all these things, they're taking all the supplements, they are using the sauna all the time, they're doing X, Y, and Z, but they're not sleeping. They're so busy. They're so loaded with work. Their training is so much that they are only sleeping like 3-4 hours a night. You can imagine that that person is not going to feel good. And somebody listening to this, you might be that person. I could almost promise you that every high-level athlete, every Olympian, everyone who's at the top of their game, think of like LeBron James, for example, one of the most prolific basketball players that there has been. He spends a huge amount of time making sure that he gets the rest that his body needs, whether that requires taking naps or whatever. Like, he's gonna practice and protect his sleep to make sure that he's getting enough rest so that his body can recover and do the things and play at the level that he wants to play. Probably second to that, making sure we get enough rest, is what are we putting into our body? How are we fueling ourselves? What are we doing from a nutrition standpoint? It just passed Halloween time. If you're fueling yourself with candy and Sour Patch Kids and, all of the things that are probably not going to provide you with the calories and the quality of nutrition that you need to perform at your best, you're not going to perform at your best. Your body's not going to feel as good, and that's going to trickle down and affect the other things going on as well. And then what I would say is probably third and more important, even though a lot of these sports recovery things that we listed off before can help with this, is this concept of stress management and how are we managing the stressors in our life and in our body. And that could be emotional things, mental, psychological things. That could be physical stressors. Again, eating a certain way can put more physical stress on the body. Training can put more physical stress on the body. But we need to be managing our stress in a productive way so that we're able to recover, because the more amount of stress our body is under, whatever kind of stress that is, the less capable our body is going to be of recovering as quickly and efficiently as possible. And speaking of training, this is another piece of this sports recovery pyramid that needs to fall somewhere more in the bottom half, a well thought out and designed training program. If you want to be able to continue to progress, continue to move the needle forward in terms of like how you're doing and how you're feeling, just doing random exercises and random workouts at random times is not as likely to help you achieve that outcome as having a well thought out training routine. And I think that's where we like to use the word training as opposed to exercising or working out. When somebody says, I'm going to train, or I have a training session, that usually means that they have a plan or a program that they are following. And you can imagine that that person is going to be way more likely to achieve whatever they're working towards than someone who's just doing random things on random days for no particular reason, but just to burn some calories. And then last but not least, as we get towards the top of the pyramid, right, is where we are going to layer in all of these other things. So if you want to spend time in the sauna, I think it's a great tool. hugely beneficial, and there can be a lot of things that people feel benefit from doing that. Same thing with ice baths, particularly on the mood side of things. That's my biggest takeaway, is like just some energy and a boost in mood. Using things like massage guns, using things like compression boots that help circulation, visiting people like myself, physical therapists, chiropractors, massage. Those are all wonderful things, but what they can't do is they can't replace the importance of getting enough sleep, the importance of fueling our body with proper nutrition, the ability to manage our stress. And they can help with those things, but they can't like jump or leapfrog the importance of doing those things. So whenever you think about where you should spend your time in terms of how you're taking care of your body, how you're managing things for yourself, or how you're setting goals in your personal life, in your work life, in your fitness life, make sure you think about that science experiment and you have rocks, pebbles, sand, and water, and how can you fit the most important things and the most things total into that beaker in science class, and start with the rocks first. So go out there, accomplish your goals, whatever you have set for yourself, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Code. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking with us to the end of the episode. And you've heard me say this before, whether it's your first time on The Code or you've been here for over 100 episodes so far. Reviews help us go a long way to get in front of more people, to share these messages, and to bring some light to other people's lives. So if you haven't left a review yet on this podcast, please go do so, whatever podcast platform you're listening on. And that would be hugely appreciated. And we hope to catch you next time. Thanks so much.